5-year forecast. So a couple times a year, we officially approve and update our 5-year forecast. In addition to that, it's something we look at and use all throughout the year as a planning tool. But there are a couple times a year we approve it and submit to the state. One of those times is here in the fall. So October, November is a time frame that we go through. We'll do it again in the spring. And so we got a few different things that we're going to cover tonight. So first thing up on our screen is we have our Journey to 2030 roadmap. And one of the things that is important to note on our Journey to 2030 is that fiscal stewardship really is a key part of this whole picture. You know, all of the things that we do and plan for and prepare for and aim for on our Journey to 2030 really rest on this fiscal stewardship rock. So up on the top right, we have a few rocks up there. The ones that people are most commonly familiar with probably are culture, inclusive excellence, and personalized learning. However, fiscal stewardship is something that we call our foundational rock, just because, like I said, we do rest a lot of other things on that. And really that fiscal stewardship is woven all throughout the district. And one of the things specifically on our Journey to 2030 map, you can see it called out here, is we have this next generation Mason quality staffing. And so as our staffing team continues to move closer to retirement, we're expecting some of those staff to become retirement eligible here in the next few years, coming up on 2030. And so part of our task will be to sustain and maintain Mason quality and bring in this next group of high quality Mason educators and keep the ball rolling. And so that'll be an important focus here over the next couple of years. Another key concept when we talk about fiscal stewardship is return on investment. So any school district, being a public school district, belongs to their community. And so we are fortunate to be in the Mason community, and the Mason community, quote unquote, owns the school district. And so one of our goals here is to provide a great return on investment for our constituents, for our taxpayers. And one of the ways that we measure that and try to really aim for it is by providing a high quality, Mason quality experience at a cost that's either at or below the state averages. So that's something that's always front and center for us and a goal that we aim for every year. So a couple of the topics that we're going to go through tonight, we're going to try to answer a few questions and go through a few highlights. We have up here on the screen some of the ones that we'll talk about. Where have we been over the last few years? Where are we at now? Where are we going in the next few years? Look at some specific highlights of our forecast that we're approving, and then just kind of an overall summary. So in terms of where we've been, if you look at financial and levy-wise over the last 20 years, there was an operating levy that was passed in 2005, so early 2000s. For anybody who's been in the community for a while knows that was really a high growth time for our district. A lot of new students, a lot of new staff coming on. There was an operating levy passed in 2005. The next levy came up in 2010, so 5 years later. That levy did not pass, and so at the time the board made a strategic decision to not go back on the ballot for another levy, but to make some cost structure changes. And so there were a lot of those things that really took place after that 2010 levy failure. There were just some changes in educational models that impacted staffing. So there's a lot of staffing reductions. A lot of very difficult decisions were made. My kudos to the team that made those difficult decisions and really kind of shaped and set up the district for the coming years ahead. Pay to participate fees were implemented. So a lot of changes after that 2010 levy, and really what that did was allow the district to go all the way to 2020 without putting another levy on the ballot. So 2020 was the next operating levy. That one fortunately did pass. And so after that levy, there were several investments that were made, I would say, in our school district. And you can kind of see them listed up here: class size, safety and security, mental wellness, ELSL support were some of the big ones. And so you might wonder where those things came out of. They really came primarily out of these community conversations and getting feedback from our parents, from our constituents. These are all things that we continue to hear over and over. So again, having class sizes that are lower, having schools that are highly safe and highly secure, having a mental wellness team in place. And so all these things were things that we've been able to do as a district over the last 4 to 5 years, in addition to the ESL support. So where are we now? Again, the 2020 levy, we're coming up on the spring of 2025, which will be 5 full years from the time that levy was passed. And so when that levy was on the ballot in 2020, one of the things that we said was that we would ensure that levy lasted at least 5 years. And so again, the spring will be that 5-year anniversary. and certainly hoping to push that out as long as we possibly can. Second thing that we're going to talk about is our debt-free facility updates. And so we have a slide on that here next, but and then the third thing will be our property value reappraisal here in Warren County. So in terms of debt-free facility renovations, really every building in the district was touched in some way. And so we had some various spaces that were tweaked and restructured and renovated to provide more usable space. So for example, at ME, we had some locker rooms that were not really being used as much, and so we converted those over to classrooms. So it was just one example of an existing space that we had. Every building had a media center that was converted to a dream center. Some people in the community had a chance to come out and view those here in the last couple months, and so that really provided a lot of new opportunities for kids to try different things in the district. And then also we added some classroom space, both at MECC and MI. So again, those were things are all part of, really a lot of that was part of reducing class size and just providing better opportunities for our kids and families. I would be remiss if I didn't say, again, debt-free, but one of the things that's, I think is really, really something to be proud of is that the total cost of those renovations and improvements was over $13 million. And so a $13 million price tag is something that is not easy to, it's not a small dollar amount. That's something that the board and teams have planned for several years. And so really proud of the fact that we did not have to go back to the community and ask them for support or a bond issue or any of those things. Really strategic planning to get us to that point where we could do those things and pay cash for them. Next topic, the 2024 reappraisal. So this is something that we have been talking about each month here over the last few months, but it's a very important topic for our community and something that we'll try to revisit here again and try to catch as many people as we can to kind of let them know what's going on. So in Ohio, every county goes through a full reappraisal process every 6 years, according to Ohio law. And for Warren County, 2024 is that year. And so our county auditor, Matt Nolan, has the task this year of going through a full process of updating those property values. And so, as we all know, we've watched the real estate market over the last couple of years and know that values have really increased significantly. And so the natural next step for that is that county auditors all across the state have this responsibility to bring up the tax values to be a little bit closer to market value. And so we'll talk more about how that impacts our community. But in short, you can see up there for our district, the average homeowner will see not a 28% increase in value, which was the average increase in our school district, but closer to a 7 to 10% increase. And again, we'll talk more about that. In other parts of the county, they're experiencing more of a 13 to 15% increase, and I'll tell you why the difference. So House Bill 920 is something that if you've been around school districts, you probably heard over the last few years. It's a bill that the state legislature passed in the late 70s. And basically the idea behind House Bill 920 was that as property values increase, the tax millage rate actually decreases. And so for any levy that was voted on, the idea is that no matter what your home value is, so if your house was worth $100,000 and it's going up 28% in value, the idea is that you're going to pay the same amount on that voted levy, whether that was $100,000 in value or $128,000 in value. And so that's something that has a lot of implications for Ohio school districts. One of the things I will say is that there are some caps or some limits on that. As millage rates drop, they can only drop so far. So there's a floor on those millage rates, and we call that the 20 mil floor. The reason that's important is that about 2/3 of Ohio school districts are actually on the 20 mil floor, and so that makes a big difference in what those taxpayers are going to see in their communities. Again, I'll talk more about that here for us in a minute. So what does this actually mean for our community? This graph up here shows our effective millage rates over the last 10 years. And so on the right-hand side there, you can see we are currently, taxes are collected in a year in arrears. And so for tax year 2023, which are tax bills that are out in 2024, you can see the effective millage rate there, about 37 mils. And then you see that big drop from 2023 to 2024. That really is the impact of House Bill 920. So all those voted levies that we've had over the last several years, even the one I mentioned from 2005, all those millage rates are going to drop come next year. And so the idea then again is that whatever a homeowner paid for that levy they passed in 2005, if you paid $500 a year for that levy in 2005, the idea is that in 2025, even if your house went up 28%, you're still going to pay that same $500 on that levy. You can see there's a line across the bottom of a black shade. The difference there is that those millage rates are something called inside millage or non-voted millage. Those rates are established by law. And so for us, that's about 5 mills. So about 87% of our effective millage is voted. And so it can drop. The other 13% won't drop. And so those inside mills are really the only thing that's going to cause an increase, a small increase for our community. This next graph is actually illustrative. And so this is more of an example of what might happen for a district who's on the 20 mil floor. So in our previous slide, we saw that that graph, that effective millage rate is going to drop, and so that's going to lower the tax bill. So that's why if you have a 28% increase in value, you might only see a 7 to 10% increase in what you're actually going to pay. Contrast that with what you see here. If you have a district that's actually on the 20 mil floor that we mentioned a minute ago, there's no farther the millage rate can drop. And so for 2/3 of those Ohio school districts that are on the 20 mil floor, if you see a 28% increase in value, there's no room for that tax rate to drop. So you're actually going to see closer to that, 20-some% increase in the tax bill. And so that's a significant factor, and one that we've really been watching over the last couple of years. The legislature has talked round and round and round about possibly doing something just in light of the real estate market and how, and 2/3 of Ohio schools being on the 20 mil floor, the impact that can have for communities. 28%, as I mentioned, was the average here in our school district. I think our county average was anywhere from 23 to 35%, depending on what district you live in. But those are even small numbers compared to some counties we heard in other parts of the state seeing 50 to 60% increases. And so if you've got a 60% increase in your home value and you're on the 20 mil floor, that's a major, major impact for homeowners and communities. Not the case here in Mason, but that's just something that we are continuing to watching for the legislature. So key takeaways on the 2024 reappraisal for our district: 28% increase in value does not mean 28% increase in tax bill. Again, House Bill 920 kind of sets it up so that if the values increase, the tax rates are going to decrease. And so the hope is that, or the design is that you're not going to pay any more on voted levies that you next year than what you paid last year. The net increase we're anticipating for us specifically is about 3 to 5%. So for every $100,000 of home value, that's about $4 per month of an increase in your tax bill for Mason City school taxes. A total tax bill closer to 7 to 10%. So that same $100,000 of home value, about $11 a month increase. Schools make up a big part of the tax bill, but again, the difference between those two is the other entities around the county that you might be paying as part of your tax bill. So county, senior services, library, township, city, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of the total picture there. So where are we going into the future? One of the things that's always important to know and be aware of as you're forecasting and projecting is, what are your significant factors, and what factors are potentially changing? So what variables are you looking at? And so that really can happen on the expense side or the revenue side. And so we'll take a look at a couple of those here next. So one of those big factors that we're working through right now is those ELL services, the English language learners. Our population has really increased substantially here over the last 7 years. Got a graph here next that we'll look at, but that's a significant factor. Next is our collective bargaining agreements with our two unions, our teacher union and our support staff union. We just finished negotiating a 3-year contract with them, so we know what those base increases are going to be over the next 3 years. So that's a significant factor. Next is utility pricing, and so utilities are electric and natural gas we're anticipating some increases there. We do have some contracts locked in for now, but we're expecting those to go up over the next couple of years. And then the last piece is just the state funding. So this next graph kind of shows our ELL, or our English language learner population, over the last 7 years. So you can see in fiscal year 17, about 600 students there. In the school year that we just finished here last year, up above 1,200. As you can see, it's more than doubled over the last 7 years. And so again, Our goal is always provide a Mason quality experience for all of our learners, and so this requires additional support. And so we did bring on some additional staff members this year, some aides and some certified staff to help support that group of students. But that is a factor that has been changing a lot over the last few years, and something we'll continue to monitor in the coming years ahead. Salaries and wages. So being a service business, like school districts are, we don't have a lot of inventory costs. Our number one cost driver really is our people. And so we're providing a service to students and families. So about 60% of our budget is spent on salaries and wages. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we have new 3-year contracts with our teacher and support staff union that go into effect for fiscal year 25 and go through fiscal year 27. So you can kind of see what we're projecting there in terms of increases for our base salary increases. We've got 3% for this year, 3% for next year, 2.75% for the third year out. And then in addition to that, we do also have step increases for longevity. So we have all those things built into the forecast that try to help us to continue to attract and retain high quality educators and support staff for our kids and families. So projected utility costs. So there's a couple different shades here on the graph. The green is our electric cost. The black is our natural gas cost, and you can kind of see where those have been at over the last few years. And we're anticipating some increases here over the next couple of years. So we're thinking what we're hearing right now is about 15 to 20% increase over the next couple of years in total. We do, like I said, we do have some contracts that lock in those rates for a period of time, but as those contracts come due, we go back out to the market to get current rates, and so that's where we're anticipating those increases coming into play. Now that in terms of dollars, probably additional $300,000 to $400,000 per year to provide the same amount of electricity and natural gas that we're using now. So that is a significant cost factor. State funding, I mentioned we are anticipating flat funding here. Now, this is an interesting graph. So this one actually goes all the way back to fiscal year 2015. This data, any of the historical data comes from the CUP report. And so it's on the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce website, the CUP report is. And so this is our state funding per student going back to 2015. So you can see back on the far left side, fiscal year 2015, about $4,500 of state revenue per student. That actually dropped down a little bit up through fiscal year 20 and back up through 21 and up a little bit higher through 24, the year that we just finished. But you'll note that 22, 23, and 24 really, again, back at that $4,500 number. And we are projecting or estimating that same amount going forward. And so, it's not really hard to look and see if you got the same state funding per student in fiscal year 15 that you have in fiscal year 29. That's a significant factor for our budget. And so we know that over time, we just mentioned the base salary increases and step increases. You've got health insurance that's going up, electricity costs are going up. There's lots of factors that we have that push costs higher. And so we kind of have a gradual increase in our costs over time. But you can see not a lot of help coming from Columbus. And so this makes us even more grateful and thankful for the support of our community back in the 2020 levy. And anytime they pass a levy for us, because we really, the success of our district really rises and falls on the shoulders of our community. And we're grateful for their support. So to take a deeper dive on a few areas of the forecast, we'll start out with our revenues by type. You can see that over 60% of our revenues are from local property taxes, about 25% from state funding. And so those are really our two key pieces that make up our total revenues. And that, like I said, that state funding number really is not increasing. So it's really any increases kind of fall back on the local community. The next graph, in terms of if you're looking just at our local property values, almost 80% of our property value comes from residential homeowners. This number has actually, that 79% has actually decreased a little bit. Back 4 to 5 years ago, that number was actually 82% residential and the commercial was 16%. So one of the things that we work hard to do is partner with our city and township, and we're grateful again for their support as they work to attract new companies to the area that can kind of help build up that and increase that commercial number. And so we're again grateful for the partnership we have with the city and any economic development incentives they are really great about working with us on to, and those things kind of help move this number a little bit more towards the commercial side. But the bulk of that, again, obviously, comes from our homeowners. On the expense side, so again, being a service business, our number one cost driver is people. And so salaries, I mentioned, about 60%, retirement and health insurance costs about 23%. So again, the vast majority of our costs really come from that area. You can see purchase services at 12%, supplies and materials at 3%, and other objects at 1%. We'll talk more about each of those categories. So in terms of personnel, we do have over 1,100 regular staff members, not counting subs and other temporary staff. So that's quite a team that we have to support our families. As I mentioned, we do have the new negotiated agreements that went into effect this summer and go through June of 2027. And so those are the number of staff, and the type of wage increases we have are the main cost drivers in terms of that personnel area of the budget. Purchase services, what things that encompasses are like a lot of educational type support services, the safety and security. A lot of our custodial staff are contracted, and so they fall in that category. And then our utility costs are another significant factor in there. Supplies and materials, about 3% of our general fund budget. Again, classroom supplies, bus fuel, maintenance supplies, those kinds of things fall in that category. We have 0% of our budget, our general fund budget, spent on capital. The reason for that is we do have a separate permanent improvement or capital improvement fund. That really goes back to kind of what I was talking about a minute ago with our partnerships with the city and the township. As they put in these economic development incentives, sometimes those things will generate payment in lieu of taxes that our companies pay to the school district. And those incentives really are what help fund our capital fund. The last item is the other items, 1%. That's our property tax collection fees from the county, audit fees, bank fees, that kind of thing. So overall outlook, take one more minute here and talk about House Bill 920. And so the next couple of slides are, again, just illustrative to kind of show the concept of what we talk about in Ohio public education and the quote-unquote typical school levy cycle. And again, this is kind of a simplified version, but the black line on the graph represents just kind of your steady increases in expenses. So over time, you're going to have a gradual increase every year in your expenses. The green line represents our revenues. And so again, because of House Bill 920 and the drops in millage rates, so as values go up, the revenue line is more steady. And so really the main time that you're going to see increases on our revenue line is when a new levy is passed. You kind of see this stair-step effect on our revenues and more of a gradual increase on our expenses. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see those periods of time where the red is circled are basically periods of time where expenses are higher than revenues, and you're kind of eating into your savings account, you're eating into your cash reserves. And so there's only a certain amount of time that you can do that. Anybody would know from your home budget that you can only eat into savings for so long until something's got to change. And so the flip side is that the blue circle up there is where, after you've passed a levy, you have new cash revenues coming in. And so you've got a period of time there where revenues are outpacing expenses. And so in those seasons, you're building up that cash reserve. And so it's kind of this cycle that you go through over a period of time. And pretty much all Ohio public school districts face a cycle similar to this right here. And so if we go to the next graph, this is what our specific situation looks like. And so the black lines on the graph are our annual revenues. And so you can see, going back to 2020, you can kind of see those increases in revenue. And that's from the 2020 phase-in levy. So again, ours was a little bit more gradual because the first phase of that was a 4.75 mils or 4.71 mils, and the second phase was 5.25. And so those increases kind of brought us up to where you see us there in 2024. That levy is fully phased in now, so we're not anticipating any new revenues from that, and really kind of stable revenues over the next few years on the revenue side. On the expense side, you can see the gray bar kind of more gradually increasing over time. The green line represents our cash reserves. So you can see once the levy was passed, we're kind of building up that cash reserve balance. So we're kind of projecting or forecasting over the next year to two, we're going to hit that phase or that period where our expenses are going to start outpacing our revenues. And so then we're going to start eating into those cash reserves. And so you can kind of see from our forecast projecting that over the next 5 years, those will really heavily be eating into those cash reserves. So again, something that we're watching and monitoring on a regular basis with our finance committee, with our board, with our team. But this is kind of this is a graph view of what you'll see in the forecast that we're approving tonight. So kind of wrapping up here in the last couple of slides. Again, one of our goals, our main goals, is to provide a great return on investment for our community. And one of the ways that we, again, try to do that is to have a high quality Mason educational experience for our students and families at a cost that's at or below state average. You can see in 2020, our niche rankings, which is one of the benchmarks or measures that we use, we were number 5 in the state of Ohio. Currently, the ratings that just came out are actually ranked number 2 in the state of Ohio, 68 in the nation. So just one indicator that we use to measure the feedback from community and constituents to know that are we meeting that goal of providing a high quality experience, and hopefully this says that we are. So again, just wrapping up with our Journey to 2030 map, and fiscal stewardship as the foundational rock that's really supporting all of those things. Again, this spring will be 5 years since our last levy passage. We are meeting our goal there, and we're going to try to push that as long as we possibly can. I can't sit here right now and pinpoint and say it'll be exactly this date that will be on the ballot, but again, that's something that we watch on a very regular basis. I think those are the things I just mentioned. So happy to take any questions. I'm disappointed the tennis team wasn't here to ask all of their important financial questions, but I'm sure they will email or call if they think of something.